Have you ever tasted something that instantly took you back to your childhood? A flavor so familiar, yet so impossible that it stops you in your tracks? That's what happened to famous chef Marcello Valente when a wrong turn during a rainstorm led him to a tiny roadside stand in the middle of nowhere. One bite of an old woman's cooking changed everything he thought he knew about his past. Some recipes are more than just instructions. Some hold secrets that have waited decades to be discovered. This is the story of a lost recipe, a forgotten promise, and a mystery that simmered for 70 years before finally coming to light. The rain pounded against the windshield of Marcello Valente's sleek black Range Rover as he squinted through the downpour. The winding back roads of rural Tennessee were never part of his itinerary, but his GPS had other plans. "Recalculating," chirped the electronic voice for the 5th time in 30 minutes. "Wonderful," Marcello muttered, his Italian accent more pronounced when irritated. "Just wonderful." In the passenger seat, his assistant Vivian tapped frantically on her tablet. "The network's executives are going to be furious. We're already 2 hours behind schedule for your flight back to New York." Marcello barely heard her. At 45, he had grown accustomed to people fussing around him. 3 Michelin stars, restaurants in Paris, London, and Milan, and a television empire built on his perfectionist approach to cuisine had insulated him from life's small inconveniences. Usually, he'd have a driver, but he'd insisted on taking the wheel after finishing the exhausting final day of filming his latest TV special, America's Hidden Flavors. The irony wasn't lost on him as they became increasingly lost in America's hidden back roads. His stomach growled. They hadn't eaten since the quick breakfast at the luxury hotel in Nashville. "We need to find something to eat," he announced, ignoring Vivian's disapproving sigh.
Chef When I'm hungry, yet not higher of a habit for from years of being the questioned the oil for Ray in his gitty. Oh,
The downpour when Marcello spotted it. A small wooden structure just off the highway with a weathered sign reading, "Ida May's Home Cooking." Smoke curled from a rusted chimney pipe, dancing with the rain. "There," he said, already turning the wheel. "You can't be serious," Vivian protested. "That place probably hasn't passed a health inspection since the Carter administration." Marcello parked in the gravel lot, where only 2 other vehicles sat, an ancient pickup truck and a modest sedan with a faded paint job. Something about the humble establishment called to him, a feeling he couldn't articulate. "Wait in the car if you want," he said, reaching for his umbrella. The wooden steps creaked under his Italian leather shoes as he approached the screen door. Inside, the space was small but immaculately clean. 6 tables covered in red and white checkered cloth filled the room, only one occupied by an elderly couple. A counter with 4 stools separated the dining area from a partially visible kitchen. The aroma hit him like a physical force. Rich, complex layers of spice, smoke, and something deeply familiar he couldn't quite place. For a moment, he stood transfixed, breathing it in. "You gonna stand there, letting the rain in? Or you gonna come eat?" The voice belonged to an elderly, black woman with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. Deep smile lines framed her eyes, which regarded him with equal parts amusement and suspicion. Her hands, weathered and strong, rested on her hips over a flour-dusted apron. "My apologies," Marcello said, closing his umbrella and the door behind him. He took a seat at the counter, noticing the woman's slight limp as she moved behind it. "What can I get for you?" she asked, sliding a laminated menu toward him. "Whatever is creating that aroma," he replied. The woman, Ida May, he presumed, studied him for a moment, taking in his expensive watch, tailored shirt, and city demeanor. "That'd be my seafood gumbo," she finally said. "Been simmering since this morning? Then that's what I'll have." She nodded and disappeared into the kitchen. Marcello glanced around, taking in the faded photographs on the walls, mostly landscapes and what appeared to be family gatherings from decades past. No accolades or reviews were framed or displayed, no evidence of social media presence or marketing strategy. Just food and memories. When Ida May returned, she carried a deep bowl of dark, fragrant gumbo with a side of steaming rice and a thick slice of cornbread. She set it before him without flourish. "Enjoy?" she said simply. Marcello lifted, the spoon to his lips. The moment the gumbo touched his tongue, the world around him disappeared. The flavors, deep, rich, perfectly balanced, transported him instantly across oceans and decades. He was suddenly 8 years old again, sitting in his grandmother Nonna Rosa's kitchen in Calabria, watching her hands move with practiced precision as she stirred a pot of something wonderful. His hand trembled slightly as he lowered the spoon. "Is something wrong with it?" Ida May asked, misinterpreting his reaction. "No," Marcello whispered, his professional composure cracking. "It's perfect. It reminds me of my grandmother's cooking." "Your grandmother must have been some cook then," Ida May replied with a small smile. "She was," Marcello said, taking another spoonful, closing his eyes to fully experience the sensation. "She was from southern Italy. She passed away when I was young." "Sorry to hear that," Ida May said, her voice softening. "This roux," Marcello said, professionalism returning as he analyzed the dish. "The way it's developed, so dark but not bitter. And there's something else, a spice blend I can't quite identify." Ida May's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. "Family secret," she said, turning to attend to the coffee pot. Marcello continued eating, each bite more revealing than the last. There was something hauntingly familiar about the technique, not just reminiscent of his grandmother's style, but specifically hers. Certain combinations that he'd never encountered anywhere else, not even in his extensive culinary travels. It was impossible, of course. His Nonna Rosa had never left Italy until the day she died, and her recipes had largely died with her, existing only in fragments in Marcello's memory. Yet here, in this tiny roadside stand in the middle of nowhere, Tennessee, something of her lived in this bowl. As the rain continued to pour outside, Marcello Valente, the man who had everything, sat transfixed by a humble bowl of gumbo and the impossible memory it awakened. Marcello barely noticed when Vivian finally entered the small restaurant, shaking rain from her umbrella with an exasperated sigh. "Chef Valente, we really need to—" She stopped mid-sentence, surprised by the expression on her boss's face. In 4 years as his assistant, she had never seen him look so affected by a meal. "Is everything all right?" "Try this," Marcello said, pushing the half-eaten bowl toward her. Vivian hesitated, then took a small bite. "It's good," she admitted, "but we're now officially going to miss your flight." Marcello waved away her concern. "Book another one for tomorrow." He turned his attention back to Ida May, who was wiping down the counter nearby. "Ma'am, I must know, where did you learn to cook like this?" The old woman shrugged. "Life teaches you plenty if you pay attention." Her eyes, sharp and observant despite her age, studied him curiously. "You're not from around here." "Italy originally. Now New York, mostly," Marcello replied, deliberately omitting his celebrity status. He had learned long ago that people treated him differently once they knew who he was. This gumbo, it's remarkable. The technique reminds me of something from my childhood. Ida May nodded politely, but offered no further information. Instead, she refilled his water glass and moved to check on her other customers. Later that night, in his luxurious hotel suite in Nashville, Marcello found himself unable to sleep. He stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching lightning illuminate the city skyline as his mind drifted back across the Atlantic to a small stone kitchen in Calabria. He could see Nonna Rosa clearly, her round face dusted with flour, strong, arms working dough on a wooden table, gray-streaked hair escaping from a colorful kerchief. She would sing softly while she cooked, old folk songs from her youth. "A proper sauce takes time, Marcelino," she would tell him. "It must tell a story." As a boy, Marcello would sit on a stool in the corner of her kitchen, watching in fascination as she transformed simple ingredients into dishes that made grown men weep with pleasure. "Why don't you write these recipes down, Nonna?" 10-year-old Marcello had once asked. Rosa had tapped her chest. "They are here, not on paper. Cooking is from the heart, not the page." When Nonna Rosa died suddenly from a stroke when Marcello was just 15, her recipes went with her. His mother knew some, but not the special ones, not the secret techniques that made Rosa's food transcendent. Marcello had spent decades trying to recreate those flavors from memory, building an empire on what he could recall, but always knowing something essential was missing. His phone buzzed, pulling him from his reverie, a text from his business partner, Lorenzo. "Check your email. New York Times review of Chicago location. Not good. Call me." Marcello sighed. His newest restaurant, Valente Chicago, had opened 3 months ago to much fanfare. It was his 12th restaurant, part of an aggressive expansion plan that Lorenzo had convinced him would cement his legacy. He ignored the message and opened his laptop instead, searching for information about Ida May's home cooking. There was almost nothing. No website, no social media presence, just a few brief mentions on road trip blogs and a single 4-star review on a travel site from someone who had stopped there by chance. Much as he had, he searched for Ida May Clayton, Tennessee chef and found only a small article from the local newspaper dated 15 years earlier, celebrating the stand's 25th anniversary. The grainy photo showed a younger Ida May standing proudly in front of her establishment. The article mentioned she had been cooking family recipes with a unique twist since 1978. Marcello scrolled through his own restaurant's Instagram account. Sleek, professional photos of artfully arranged dishes, each garnering thousands of likes. How strange that the most authentic food he'd tasted in years had no digital footprint at all. His phone rang. Lorenzo again. Marcello let it go to voicemail. Instead, he opened his personal photo album on his laptop, clicking through to the old family photos he had digitized years ago. There weren't many of Nonna Rosa. Cameras hadn't been common in their village during her younger days, but he found the one he was looking for. Rosa at her stove, stirring a pot of something with the same wooden spoon she had used for decades. Marcello zoomed in on her face, studying her expression of concentration. He could almost smell the aromas from that kitchen. What secrets had she taken with her? And how, impossibly, had flavors so similar ended up in a humble roadside stand in Tennessee? He picked up his phone and called the hotel concierge. "I need to cancel my flight and extend my stay indefinitely." When morning came, Marcello skipped the breakfast meeting with the network executives who had produced his TV special. He ignored Lorenzo's increasingly concerned messages about the Chicago restaurant situation. He postponed an interview with Food and Wine magazine. Instead, he rented a car and, armed with only his memories and curiosity, drove back toward Ida May's, retracing the route from yesterday's wrong turn. The rain had cleared, revealing rolling green hills and farmland stretching to the horizon. As he drove, Marcello recalled the day of Nonna Rosa's funeral. While the family had gathered in the main house, teenage Marcello had slipped away to her kitchen. He had opened her recipe box, hoping to find her secrets preserved, only to discover it contained just a handful of basic recipes written in someone else's handwriting, along with shopping lists and notes. Nothing of her special dishes, nothing of her magic. That day, he had vowed to become a chef, to recapture what had been lost. That promise had driven him through culinary school, through grueling apprenticeships, through 16-hour days building his reputation dish by dish. Now, decades later, a bowl of gumbo at a roadside stand had shaken the very foundation of that journey. As Ida May's came into view, Marcello noticed something he had missed in yesterday's downpour: a small herb garden flourishing behind the building. He parked and walked toward it, recognizing rosemary, thyme, and something else, a specific variety of oregano that he had only ever seen in Calabria. His heart quickened as he pushed open the door to the restaurant, the familiar bell jingling overhead. This time, he was determined to learn the truth, whatever it might be. The morning light streamed through the windows of Ida May's, casting long shadows across the worn wooden floor. Unlike yesterday's rain-driven rush, the place was empty, save for an older man nursing a coffee in the corner. Ida May looked up from where she was rolling out dough at the counter. Surprise flickered across her face before her expression settled into careful neutrality. "Didn't expect to see you back so soon," she said, dusting flour from her hands onto her apron. "Most folks passing through don't make a return trip." "I'm not most folks," Marcello replied, taking a seat at the counter where he'd sat yesterday. "And your gumbo deserves a return trip." Ida May studied him carefully. Today she wore a simple blue dress beneath her apron, a small silver cross hanging at her neck. Up close, Marcello guessed she was in her late 70s, but she moved with the sure confidence of someone who had spent decades mastering her craft. "Just you today? No fancy assistant?" she asked, pouring him coffee without waiting for his request. "Just me," he confirmed, accepting the mug with a nod of thanks. "I wanted to try more of your cooking. Everything on the menu, if possible." Ida May raised an eyebrow. "That's a lot of food for one man." "I'm a chef," Marcello admitted. "Food is my life." "That's so?" Ida May seemed unimpressed. "Any place I might know?" Marcello hesitated. "I have a few restaurants. In New York, mostly." Ida May wiped down the counter. "Well, I've never been to New York. Little too busy for my taste." She gestured to the empty restaurant. "As you can see, we're not exactly rushed off our feet here." "How long have you had this place?" Marcello asked, sipping his coffee. "Surprisingly good, strong and fresh." "Opened in '78, she replied. 44 years next month?" "That's impressive. Most restaurants don't last 5 years." Ida May shrugged. "Not a restaurant, really. Just a food stand that grew a roof and some walls over time." She tapped the counter. "Now, what'll you have besides coffee?" "I'd like to try your biscuits and gravy," Marcello said. "And then maybe some of that fried chicken I see on your sign." "At 9:30 in the morning?" Ida May chuckled. "You really are serious about this food tour." As she turned toward the kitchen, Marcello noticed her limp was more pronounced today. "Is your leg troubling you?" he asked. Ida May paused. "Old injury. Acts up sometimes. Nothing serious." While she cooked, Marcello took in more details he'd missed during yesterday's rain-soaked visit. The walls were decorated with faded photographs, mostly landscapes and what appeared to be family gatherings, some dating back decades judging by the clothing styles. A shelf near the register held an assortment of small carved wooden figures. Birds, mostly. "Did you make those?" he asked when Ida May returned with a plate of fluffy biscuits smothered in thick, peppery gravy. "My husband, Walter," she replied. "He carved until arthritis took his hands. Been gone 12 years now. I'm sorry. Been a lot of years. You eat now before it gets cold." Marcello took a bite of the biscuits and gravy. The biscuits were light despite their substantial appearance, with a buttery, layered texture that spoke of skilled hands. But it was the gravy that stopped him mid-bite. There again was that haunting familiarity, a technique of incorporating the fat that he'd only ever seen his grandmother use. "This is remarkable," he said. "The way you've incorporated the fat and flour, creating that silky texture without any lumps or separation. My grandmother had a similar technique." Something shifted in Ida May's expression, a flicker of unease before her face settled back into its pleasant mask. "Most good cooks figure out the same tricks eventually," she said. "Not this one," Marcello insisted. "This is specific. Even in professional kitchens, I rarely see it done exactly this way." Ida May busied herself wiping down the already clean counter. "If you say so." After finishing the biscuits and gravy, Marcello was treated to fried chicken that literally brought tears to his eyes, the crust seasoned with a blend that triggered memories of Sunday dinners in his grandmother's garden. Then came collard greens cooked with a sofrito base that no southern cook he'd ever met would use, but his Nonna Rosa had employed in many dishes. With each plate, his certainty grew. These weren't coincidences. "Ms. Clayton," Marcello said as she cleared his last plate, "I have to ask you directly. Did you ever know an Italian woman named Rosa Valente? She would have been here maybe 60, 70 years ago." The serving spoon in Ida May's hand clattered to the floor. She bent slowly to retrieve it, her face hidden from view. When she straightened, her expression was composed. "Can't say that I did," she replied, but her eyes didn't meet his. Not many Italians passed through these parts back then. Before Marcello could press further, the bell over the door jingled as a group of 4 customers entered. Locals, judging by Ida May's familiar greetings. She moved away to attend to them, clearly relieved by the interruption. While waiting for a chance to speak with her again, Marcello wandered around the small dining room, examining the photographs more closely. In the corner, partially hidden, behind the register, was a faded color photograph he hadn't noticed before. It showed a much younger Ida May standing beside another young woman. Though the photo was weathered and the face partly obscured by a sun hat, something about the second woman's posture and profile made Marcello's heart race. He leaned closer just as Ida May appeared suddenly at his elbow. "Best not to go poking through other people's memories," she said quietly, reaching past him to turn the photograph face down. "Some stories aren't meant to be shared." Marcello returned to his hotel room that evening with his mind racing. He paced the length of the suite, unable to shake the feeling that Ida May was hiding something significant. The flavors in her cooking, the carefully turned photograph, her reaction when he mentioned his grandmother's name, all pointed to a connection she seemed determined to conceal. His phone buzzed for the dozenth time that day. Lorenzo again. "This time," Marcello answered. "Finally!" Lorenzo's voice boomed through the speaker. "Where have you been? The Chicago situation is getting worse." "What Chicago situation?" Marcello asked, though he already knew. "The review, Marcello. The Times gave us 2 stars. 2. They called the menu derivative and lacking soul." Reservations are down 30%. Marcello sighed. 2 stars is still good, Lorenzo. Not for a Valente restaurant. We built this brand on excellence. Lorenzo paused, lowering his voice. Look, the investors are nervous. We need you back here, showing your face, reassuring everyone, not wandering around Tennessee for some TV show that wrapped days ago. I'm working on something important, Marcello said, staring out the window at the Nashville skyline. More important than the empire we've spent 20 years building? The question hung in the air. A month ago, Marcello would have been on the first flight back, ready to personally take over the Chicago kitchen until critics came around. Now, he wasn't so sure. Give me a few more days, he said finally. I'll call you tomorrow. After hanging up, Marcello opened his laptop and did what he should have done immediately. He called his mother in Italy. Despite the late hour in Calabria, Sofia Valente answered quickly, her face appearing on screen, lined with age, but still beautiful. Marcello, what a lovely surprise. Is everything okay? Yes, Mama, everything's fine. I wanted to ask you something about Nonna Rosa. His mother's expression softened. Your grandmother? What about her? Did she ever mention living in America? Before marrying Nonno Giovanni? Sofia looked surprised. Well, yes, though she rarely spoke of it. She lived in America briefly, as a young woman. Sometime in the early 1950s, I believe. Why do you ask? Marcello's heart raced. Do you know where in America? Somewhere in the South, I think. Her brother had gone there for work on the railroads. She joined him for a time before returning to Italy to marry your grandfather. It was an arranged marriage, you know. Traditional families back then. Did she ever mention someone named Ida May? Or Clayton? His mother thought for a moment. Not that I recall, though she did mention once having a dear friend in America. She never said much about it, just that leaving was very difficult. Sofia leaned closer to the camera. Marcello, what is this about? I may have found someone who knew her, he replied, trying to keep his voice steady. Someone who cooks, just like she did. The next morning, Marcello drove to the Millfield County Historical Society, housed in a brick building that had once been the town's first library. Inside, a gray-haired volunteer looked up from her computer. Can I help you? I hope so, Marcello said. I'm researching the history of Italian immigrants in this area during the 1950s, particularly those who might have worked on the railroad. The woman, Barbara, according to her name tag, brightened. Oh, we have quite a collection on that. There was a significant group of Italian workers brought in to help rebuild the Millfield-Charleston line from 1950 to 1956. Let me show you. She led him to a small archive room and pulled out several folders of newspaper clippings, photographs, and documents. The Italian workers mostly lived in a camp near the tracks, Barbara explained, spreading out black and white photographs showing groups of men standing beside railroad equipment. Some brought family members over eventually. Most moved on when the work was completed, but a few settled here. Marcello scanned the photographs carefully. In one, dated 1953, he spotted a familiar face, younger but unmistakable. Who is this man? He asked, pointing. Barbara squinted. That's Antonio Russo. He was one of the foremen. She shuffled through another folder. He had a sister who came over in, let me see. Yes, 1952. Rosa Russo. She pulled out a document, a work permit application with a small photo attached. Marcello's breath caught. The young woman in the photograph was undeniably his grandmother. She would have been using her maiden name then, before marrying his grandfather Valente. Do you have any information about where she lived? Who she associated with? Barbara shook her head. Not specifically, but most of the Italian families had some contact with the local community through church or markets. She thought for a moment. You might check the archive of the Millfield Gazette. They used to run a social column noting community events. 2 hours later, Marcello had found what he was looking for, a small mention in a May 1953 edition of the paper. The Ladies' Aid Society hosted their annual spring social last Saturday. Miss Ida Mae Johnson and Miss Rosa Russo provided refreshments to much acclaim. Ida Mae Johnson, before she was Ida Mae Clayton. His phone rang, interrupting his research. It was Vivian. Chef, I've been calling hotels all over Nashville looking for you. The network is furious about the missed interviews, and Lorenzo says Chicago is in crisis. What should I tell them? Marcello glanced down at the newspaper article, then at his grandmother's young face in the work permit photo. Tell them I'm taking a leave of absence, he said. Family matters. After leaving the Historical Society, Marcello drove to a coffee shop with internet access. He logged into the management system for his restaurant group and began reviewing reports. The Chicago situation wasn't as dire as Lorenzo had suggested, but there were troubling signs. Customer feedback indicated the food was technically perfect, but lacked warmth and distinction. The same criticism that had begun to appear about several of his restaurants. When had cooking become just another business for him? When had he stopped creating food that made people feel something? The truth hit him with surprising force. He hadn't felt genuine passion for cooking in years, until tasting Ida Mae's food awakened something in him. For the next week, Marcello became a regular at Ida Mae's Home Cooking. Each day, he arrived mid-morning and stayed until closing, initially just as a customer, but gradually offering to help with small tasks. At first, Ida Mae regarded him with suspicion, but she didn't turn away the extra hands. "You cut those onions too thick," she commented on the third day as he helped prep for lunch. "Show me how you do it," Marcello said, setting down his knife. Ida Mae demonstrated, her aged hands still remarkably deft with the blade. "Like this, thin enough to melt away, but not so thin they burn." Marcello nodded, watching closely. It was the exact technique his grandmother had used, one he'd abandoned years ago for the more fashionable brunoised cut favored in high-end kitchens. "You're a strange man," Ida Mae said as she transferred the onions to a cast-iron skillet. "Famous chef, according to what Mrs. Peterson told me after looking you up on her phone. Got restaurants all over the world. Yet here you are, cutting onions in my little place." "Sometimes the most important lessons come from unexpected teachers," Marcello replied. Ida Mae gave him a long look. "And what lesson are you hoping to learn here?" Marcello considered his answer carefully. How to cook with heart again. How to make food that makes people feel something real. Something in his honest answer seemed to soften her reserve. "Well," she said after a moment, "at least you know what you're missing." As days passed, Marcello learned more about Ida Mae's life. She had married Walter Clayton in 1957. They'd never had children. "Wasn't in God's plan for us," she explained simply. Walter had worked at the paper mill, while Ida Mae initially cooked for church functions and local events. "When did you open this place?" Marcello asked, as they washed dishes side by side one evening. 1978. Walter got hurt at the mill. Back injury. Compensation wasn't enough. I'd always dreamed of my own place, so we took our savings and built the stand. She gestured around the small dining room. Added the indoor seating in '85. Never got much bigger than this. Marcello noticed she avoided any mention of her life before meeting Walter, and he didn't press. Building trust took time. On the 6th day, Marcello arrived to find Ida May struggling to serve the handful of regular customers. Her limp was worse, her face tight with pain. Hips acting up, she admitted when he asked. Happens sometimes. Let me handle things today, he offered. You rest? To his surprise, she agreed, settling into a chair near the register while Marcello took over the kitchen. He followed her recipes exactly, checking with her before each step. The locals eyed him curiously, but seemed to accept his presence once they tasted his cooking. Not bad, Ida May conceded after sampling his gumbo. Little heavy on the time, though. That evening, as they were closing up, a sudden thunderstorm broke overhead. Rain pounded the tin roof, and through the cacophony came another sound, dripping water. Not again, Ida May sighed, looking up at a growing wet patch on the ceiling. Roof's been leaking all spring. I can help fix it, Marcello offered. Ida May raised an eyebrow. You know roofing too? I worked construction through culinary school, he explained. I can at least patch it temporarily. The next morning, Marcello arrived with supplies from the hardware store. The rain had stopped, but more was forecast for the afternoon. He worked quickly, climbing the rickety ladder to the low roof. Through a gap in the aging shingles, he spotted what looked like a small storage space in the attic. Is there access to the attic? He called down to Ida May. Hatch in the back storeroom, she replied. Be careful up there. Haven't been in it for years. The attic was dusty and cramped, illuminated only by the light coming through the roof vent. Marcello crawled carefully across the joists, locating the leak and applying a waterproof patch. As he worked, he noticed an old trunk pushed against the far wall. Curiosity got the better of him. The trunk wasn't locked. Inside, beneath a layer of cloth, he found kitchen items, an old hand-cranked pasta maker, several baking dishes, and, most surprisingly, a distinctive copper pot with a wooden handle. The design was unmistakable, identical to one his grandmother had treasured, brought with her from the old country. His heart pounding, Marcello carefully closed the trunk and finished the roof repair. When he climbed down, Ida May was watching. Him? Her expression unreadable. Fix the leak, he said. Should hold until you can get a professional. Thank you, she replied. Marcello hesitated, then decided to take the risk. Ida May, I saw a copper pot in the attic. It's very similar to one my grandmother owned. Ida May's face tightened. Like I said, some stories aren't meant to be shared. My grandmother was Rosa Russo before she married, Marcello said gently. I know she was here in the early 1950s. I know you knew her. Ida May looked away, her hands gripping her cane more tightly. Finally, she sighed. Yes, I knew a Rosa once. But that was another life, another world. Things were complicated then. Please, Marcello said. She was my grandmother. Her recipes, her techniques, they died with her. Yet somehow they live on here, in your cooking. Some things are best left in the past, Ida May insisted, but her voice wavered. Before Marcello could respond, a sharp crack of thunder sounded overhead, and rain began to pound the newly patched roof. The storm kept customers away, leaving Marcello and Ida May alone in the restaurant. They worked in silence, Marcello prepping vegetables while Ida May kneaded dough for tomorrow's biscuits. The only sounds were the rain on the roof and the rhythmic thump of Ida May's hands against the floured countertop. Your patch is holding, she said finally, nodding toward the ceiling, where before there would have been a steady drip. "It'll do for now," Marcello replied. "But you should get a professional to look at it soon." Another silence fell between them. Marcello chopped bell peppers into perfect, even pieces, a chef's habit he couldn't break even here. He wanted to press Ida May about Rosa, but sensed that pushing too hard would only make her retreat further. "You got her hands," Ida May said suddenly, her eyes on Marcello's fingers as they worked the knife. Rosa's hands moved just like that, precise, like they knew what to do without her telling them. Marcello's knife paused mid-cut. "People used to tell me that when I was young." "She was talented," Ida May continued, her focus on the dough before her. "Picked up Southern cooking faster than anyone I ever saw. Said it wasn't so different from Italian cooking, just different ingredients telling the same stories." "That sounds like something she would say," Marcello smiled. "She always told me cooking was storytelling." Ida May nodded. "She changed how I cooked, taught me about building flavors slowly. I taught her about our local ingredients, our traditions." She sighed. "We learned from each other." "How did you meet?" Marcello asked carefully. "Church social, spring of '52. Most folks weren't too welcoming to the Italian railroad workers or their families. Different times then." Ida May's hands kept working the dough, but her eyes grew distant. "But Rosa and I, we both loved cooking, started sharing recipes, became friends despite everything." Thunder crashed again, closer this time, and the lights flickered. "Better get the candles," Ida May said. "Power goes out easy here during storms." Marcello moved to the supply shelf where he'd seen candles earlier. As he reached for them, he accidentally knocked over a heavy, ancient-looking cookbook. It fell to the floor, its pages splaying open. Between two pages, a yellowed envelope slipped out. He picked it up. The paper was brittle with age, the handwriting faded but still legible. It was addressed simply to Rosa in elegant script. "What's that you got there?" Ida May asked sharply. Marcello held up the envelope. "It fell out of this cookbook, Ida." May's face paled. She moved quicker than he'd seen her move all week, snatching the envelope from his hand. But in her haste, the fragile paper tore, and a folded letter slipped out, landing on the floor between them. Marcello knelt to retrieve it, and when he saw the writing, his heart stopped. He recognized it instantly. The distinctive way the letters slanted, the particular curl of the R's. He'd seen it on the few recipe cards of his grandmother's that had survived. "This is her handwriting," he whispered. "My grandmother's." The letter was written in Italian, his grandmother's native language. His eyes scanned the faded words, translating automatically. "My dearest friend, by the time you read this, I will be on a ship back to Italy. I tried to find you to say goodbye, but they say you have gone to visit your sister. Perhaps it is better this way. I don't know if I could bear to see your face and still find the strength to leave. My family has arranged my marriage. A good man, they say, from a respectable family in my village. I have no choice in this matter. My brother says I have brought enough shame to our name with my inappropriate friendships and foreign ideas. What we dreamed together, our little restaurant, our shared recipes, it must remain just that, a dream. But know that you have changed how I see the world, how I understand food and friendship and..." The letter ended abruptly, as if the writer had been interrupted or perhaps couldn't find the words to continue. Marcello looked up at Ida May, whose eyes shone with unshed tears. "She never finished it," Ida May said softly. "They came to take her to the train station earlier than expected. She pushed this into my hand at the last minute, told me to read it later." She shook her head. I was so angry at her for leaving that I put it away without reading it. By the time I did, months later, she was married in Italy, gone from my life forever. You were going to open a restaurant together, Marcello said, understanding dawning. That's why your techniques are so similar. You were planning to combine Italian and Southern cooking. Ida May nodded slowly. We had it all figured out, saved every penny, found a little place for rent in Knoxville, away from folks who might cause trouble over... She paused. Over 2 women from different backgrounds being business partners. Marcello sensed there was more to the story than Ida May was sharing, but he didn't push. Before she left, Ida May continued after a moment, she gave me her recipes, all of them, written down special for me, plus the techniques her mama had taught her. Said, if only one of us could live the dream, it should be me. She gestured around the small restaurant. Never made it to Knoxville, but I kept my promise to use what she taught me. Lightning flashed, illuminating Ida May's aged face. For a moment, Marcello could see the young woman she must have been, full of dreams and determination. I have something to tell you, she said, her voice suddenly weary. Been trying to find the right time. She lowered herself carefully into a chair. I've got cancer, pancreatic. Doctor says maybe 6 months if I'm lucky. The admission hit Marcello like a physical blow. I'm so sorry. Been looking for someone, she continued, her eyes fixed on the letter in his hands. Someone who understands food the way Rosa and I did. Someone to pass these recipes to. She looked up at him. Then you walked in during that rainstorm, tasted my gumbo, and got that same look on your face that Rosa used to get. Like you were tasting memories. That's exactly what it was, Marcello said softly. I've been watching you this week. You've got her gift, her heart for food. Ida May's voice grew firm. I need someone to keep these recipes alive after I'm gone. Not in some fancy restaurant where folks pay hundreds of dollars for tiny portions, but the way they were meant to be enjoyed. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside Ida May's home cooking, a different kind of tempest was brewing as Marcello faced an unexpected crossroads. Marcello stared at the rain beating against the windows, his mind racing. The storm outside mirrored the turmoil within him. After a long silence, he spoke. Let me help you with the dinner prep, he said quietly. We can talk more after closing. Ida May nodded, seeming relieved by the reprieve. They worked side by side for the rest of the day, serving the few customers brave enough to venture out in the storm. Neither mentioned the letter or Ida May's revelation, but a new understanding hung in the air between them. That night, in his hotel room, Marcello couldn't sleep. He picked up his phone and finally returned Lorenzo's most recent call. Tell me, you're coming back tomorrow, Lorenzo said without greeting. It's not that simple, Marcello replied. What's not simple? The Chicago restaurant is bleeding money. The New York Times wants to interview you about your creative direction after that 2-star review. Your team is adrift without you. I've found something important here, Lorenzo. More important than 20 years of work? More important than the 300 people we employ? What could possibly be in the middle of nowhere, Tennessee, that matters more than that? Marcello closed his eyes, trying to find the words to explain. It's about my grandmother's recipes, the ones I've been trying to recreate my whole career. A heavy sigh came through the phone. Look, Marcello, I understand you're having some kind of midlife culinary crisis, but we have investors who put their trust in us. We have obligations. I just need a little more time. Time isn't something we have. The investors are calling an emergency meeting tomorrow. If you're not there, They're going to vote on a restructuring that would reduce your control of the company. I've held them off as long as I can." Marcello sat up straight. "They can't do that. Read your contract again. If you're deemed to be neglecting your duties as head chef and creative director for more than 10 business days, they absolutely can." Lorenzo's voice softened slightly. "Look, I don't want this to happen. Come back tomorrow. Whatever you found in Tennessee will still be there after we fix the Chicago situation." After hanging up, Marcello paced the hotel room. The business he'd spent his adult life building was at risk. 300 employees depended on him. His reputation, his legacy, was on the line. But that legacy suddenly felt hollow. For years, he'd been trying to recreate the magic of his grandmother's cooking, never quite capturing it despite all his training and resources. Now, he'd found the missing pieces in the most unexpected place, along with a connection to his grandmother he never knew existed. And Ida May was dying. 6 months, she'd said. The recipes that had been preserved through her friendship with his grandmother would die with her if he didn't learn them now. Dawn found him still awake, no closer to a decision. When he arrived at Ida May's that morning, he found the parking lot unusually full. Inside, a man in an expensive suit was sitting across from Ida May at one of the small tables. 3 other men stood nearby, looking impatient. "Think about it, Mrs. Clayton," the seated man was saying. "The land alone is worth 4 times what you paid for the whole property. We're offering far more than that." Ida May noticed Marcello in the doorway and looked relieved. "There's my chef now. If you'll excuse me, gentlemen, we open in 20 minutes and have prep to do." The men left reluctantly, the leader handing Ida May a business card. "Call me when you're ready to be reasonable," he said. "This offer won't stay open forever." After they'd gone, Marcello helped Ida May to her feet. She seemed more tired today, her movements slower. "Who were they?" he asked. "Buyers from that big chain restaurant on the highway," she replied. "Been after this place for 2 years now. Want to tear it down, build one of their franchises. Offered good money." She shook her head. "What would I do with money at my age? Especially now?" As they prepared for the day, Ida May showed Marcello how to make her famous sweet potato pie. The technique involved a specific way of incorporating butter into the crust that reminded him instantly of his grandmother's pastry method. "Did Rosa teach you this?" he asked. "Other way around," Ida May smiled. "I taught her, but she added that little twist with the nutmeg. Said it reminded her of something her mama used to make." While they worked, Marcello's phone buzzed repeatedly. In his pocket, text messages from Lorenzo, from Vivian, from the restaurant manager in Chicago. Finally, he turned it off. By mid-afternoon, his decision was weighing on him like a physical burden. He needed to be on a plane now to make tomorrow's investor meeting, but the thought of leaving, of losing this connection to his past, to his grandmother's legacy, was agonizing. "You got troubles," Ida May observed as they washed pots after the lunch rush. "It wasn't a question." "I have to make a choice," Marcello admitted. "My business partner called an emergency meeting. If I don't go back to New York tonight, I could lose control of my restaurant group." Ida May nodded slowly. "Important decision. But if I leave now?" He gestured around the kitchen. "All this, what you could teach me, my grandmother's recipes, I might lose that forever." "Life's full of hard choices," Ida May said. "What does your heart tell you?" Marcello dried his hands on a towel. "My heart hasn't been doing the talking for a long time. My head has been making the decisions. What makes business sense? What impresses critics? What builds the brand?" "And how's that working out for you?" she asked, her eyes wise and knowing. Before he could answer, the bell over the door jingled. Marcello turned, expecting a customer, but instead saw Lorenzo standing in the doorway, looking severely out of place in his tailored Italian suit. "So, this is where you've been hiding," Lorenzo said, taking in the humble surroundings with barely concealed disdain. "I had to track your phone to find this place." "Lorenzo," Marcello said, shocked. "What are you doing here?" "Saving your career. Saving our company." Lorenzo approached, lowering his voice. The investors moved the meeting up. "It's happening. Tonight. If you're not there, it's over." Ida May had moved to the counter, watching the exchange with interest. "This is my business partner," Marcello explained to her. "I figured as much," she replied. "Got the same fancy shoes as you had on that first day." Lorenzo glanced at Ida May, then back to Marcello. "We need to go. Now. The corporate jet is waiting." At Nashville, Marcello felt torn in half. "I can't just leave. There are things here I need to—" "Whatever quaint country recipes you've discovered can wait," Lorenzo interrupted. "Your empire can't." The word empire hung in the air, suddenly sounding hollow to Marcello's ears. "It's okay," Ida May said, softly. "Go handle your business. These old recipes have waited 70 years. They can wait a little longer." But they couldn't, Marcello thought, looking at Ida May's frail form. She had 6 months, maybe less. And these weren't just recipes. They were his heritage, a connection to his grandmother he'd never known existed. As if reading his thoughts, Lorenzo played his final card. "I negotiated a compromise. Get on that plane with me now. Handle the investor meeting, spend 2 weeks getting Chicago back on track, and then you can take a sabbatical. 3 months, paid. Come back here if you want. But if you don't come now, there won't be a company to come back to." Marcello looked between Lorenzo and Ida May, feeling the weight of the moment. Outside, the storm had finally passed, leaving a strange, expectant calm. "I need a minute," he said to Lorenzo, who scowled but stepped outside to make a call. Alone with Ida May, Marcello struggled to find the right words. "Go," she said firmly. "Handle your business, Chef Valente. I understand how the world works. I'll come back," he promised. "As soon as I can." Ida May's smile held a lifetime of seeing promises made and broken. If you can, you can. If you can't, you can't. Marcello saw the resignation in her eyes. How? Many times had life taught her that people with choices eventually chose the easier path. How many times had she been left behind? "No," he said suddenly, surprising himself with the firmness in his voice. "I'm not leaving. Your business has survived without me before. It will again." He pulled out his phone and called Lorenzo, back inside. "I'm staying," he told his partner. "Just until tomorrow afternoon. I'll make the evening meeting, but I need today. Non-negotiable." Lorenzo's face reddened. "Are you insane? Do you have any idea what's at stake?" "I do," Marcello replied calmly. "Probably better than I have in years. Call the investors. Tell them I'll be there with a new vision for the company that will blow them away." After Lorenzo stormed out, promising this wasn't over, Marcello turned to Ida May. "Show me everything, every recipe, every technique. I'll stay up all night if I have to." For the next 24 hours, they worked without stopping. Ida May shared recipes she hadn't made in decades, showing Marcello the precise techniques that made each dish special. Some were clearly her own creations, others bore the unmistakable influence of his grandmother. Each came with a story, a memory, a piece of history. "This is the last one," Ida May said as dawn approached. She demonstrated a particular stirring method for the gumbo that had first caught Marcello's attention. "Your grandmother used to say this was the real secret ingredient: love and intention in how you stir. Not too fast to break the ingredients, not too slow to let them separate. Just right, with your whole heart in your hand." Marcello tried it, feeling something profound in the rhythm that connected him across time to his grandmother. As he prepared to leave, Ida May pressed a small, worn notebook into his hands. Rosa's original recipes. She translated them for me, but kept some notes in Italian. "You'll understand those better than I ever could." "I'll be back in 2 weeks," Marcello promised. "And then we'll figure out what comes next, together." But when he returned exactly 2 weeks later, having smoothed things over with the investors and implemented emergency changes in Chicago, Ida May's condition had deteriorated rapidly. She was in the hospital, the restaurant closed indefinitely. "Cancer's spreading faster than they thought," she told him from her hospital bed, her voice weaker but her eyes still bright. "Don't look so sad. I've had a good, long run." Over the next 4 months, Marcello split his time between New York and Tennessee. In New York, he restructured his restaurant empire, stepping back from day-to-day operations and bringing in young, talented chefs to run each location. In Tennessee, he spent every possible moment with Ida May, learning her stories, documenting her techniques, and helping her put her affairs in order. When she became too weak to leave the hospital, Marcello brought the kitchen to her, cooking her favorite dishes in the hospital's family room and smuggling them into her room. "You're as stubborn as she was," Ida May told him one evening, watching him adjust the seasoning in a soup. Rosa never took no for an answer either. In her final days, Ida May made Marcello promise not to let the recipes die with her. "Not just in fancy restaurants," she insisted. "Food like this belongs to everyone." After she passed, Marcello kept his word. He paid off the tax liens and back mortgage on her property. But instead of selling it to the chain restaurant that still wanted the land, he renovated the humble stand. He preserved its character while making it structurally sound, adding better equipment, but keeping the same tables, the same counter, the same welcoming atmosphere. 6 months after Ida May's death, Ida May and Rosa's home cooking reopened its doors. Marcello himself operated it 2 days a week, serving the authentic recipes at the same affordable prices Ida May had charged. The other 5 days, he used the space to train promising young chefs from disadvantaged backgrounds, teaching them not just cooking skills, but the business knowledge needed to succeed. His restaurant empire continued without him at the helm, though he maintained creative oversight. Lorenzo never fully understood Marcello's choice, but grudgingly admitted that the publicity around the chef's heartwarming side project had actually boosted their high-end brand. 1 year to the day after Ida May's passing, Marcello was cleaning out the last of her personal effects from the small apartment behind the restaurant when he found something tucked inside the binding of her recipe book, the missing part of his grandmother's letter that had fallen out during the storm. With trembling hands, he unfolded it and read, "I cannot write the words my heart feels, for they are too dangerous in this time and place. But know that what we shared goes beyond friendship, beyond cooking, beyond anything I have known or will ever know again. There is something else I must tell you, something I've hidden even from my brother. I am with child. The father is gone, back to Italy months ago, and I will raise this baby in my homeland, as a Valente. Perhaps someday, when the world is different, my child or my child's children might find their way back to you, back to the dream we shared. Until then, I leave you my heart in these recipes. May they bring you the joy that you have brought me. Forever yours, Rosa Marcello sat down hard on Ida May's old rocking chair, the truth washing over him like a wave. Ida May hadn't just been his grandmother's friend. And the timing, he quickly calculated the dates. His mother had been born almost exactly 9 months after Rosa's return to Italy, which meant Ida May Clayton had been his grandmother's half-sister, making this place and these recipes his birthright in ways he never could have imagined. As the evening sun cast long shadows through the windows of the little restaurant, Marcello finally understood why the flavors had called so powerfully to his soul from that very first taste. They were never just his grandmother's recipes. They were the living legacy of 2 extraordinary women who had created a culinary tradition that transcended separation, distance, and time. Outside, new customers were already lining up for dinner service, drawn by the aromas that promised both innovation and tradition, both past and future, both love and sustenance. A promise that Marcello, at last, was fully prepared to keep. That was the end of the story. I hope you enjoyed this emotional journey of discovery, family secrets, and the healing power of food. Where are you listening from today? I'd love to know which part of the world this story reached. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming content like this. Don't forget to share with friends and family who might appreciate a story about rediscovering what truly matters in life. Each share helps spread kindness and awareness. Thanks for listening, and I'll be back soon with another story that touches the heart.